Okay, so let's go over here. So we were talking about Star Wars, and we were saying I was using the phrase how do we fix it, but really what we're talking about here is talking about the things that Star Wars, the original Star Wars movie, and even specifically, I'm going back and referring to the despecialized edition. So what was actually shown when Star Wars first played in theaters back in 1977. What is it that actually captured people back then? And Star Wars, some people would say, why are you even studying Star Wars? Hasn't everybody said everything that needs to be said about Star Wars? Because every one of these books that is actually about genre fiction or entertainment fiction and so forth, and or talking about the hero's journey, is going to use Star Wars, the A New Hope, what they call it now, but just the original Star Wars movie, as the quintessential example of the hero's journey. And one of the reasons that movie works so well is because it is so well structured, and it follows the hero's journey, and it has all of our archetypes in them. It hits all of the structural parts that the story is supposed to have from the story structure perspective of the hero's journey, and it just boom, 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 does all of these things so well. And you've got all of these different examples that are used time and time again in the book, going back to Star Wars. Here is the example of that in Star Wars. However, what I realized is that when I was trying to write the first start of this screenplay over here I have been working on, which is a hero's journey story, I realized that what people actually don't talk about is the things that Star Wars does differently or is strange, non-standard for the hero's journey. And if you think that everything in the movie is the hero's journey and you just do all of these things, write what you see up there, use exactly that structure and then put it into, but then write your story with it, but use that structure. You're seeing that structure up there on the screen. You're going to be missing a lot, especially in Act 1, because it does some things very strangely, especially in Act 1, that actually don't fit. It works for this movie, and especially it works because of the great editing in the movie. I mean, so it's excellently edited, because there were even things in the script that needed to come out, needed to be removed, and it was done, and they made it work. But one of the things that we were saying that's the majorly strange thing that this Star Wars movie does is that the non-specialized edition is a 2-hour movie, and Luke Skywalker, the hero of the movie, the main character, doesn't show up until 17 minutes in. So you go through 17 minutes of this 2-hour movie, and you haven't even seen your main character yet. And one of the things that people are going to say, and this includes Cameron, when he's like, all right, we're going to be using the hero's journey. Star Wars is going to be a great model on that. So, that's the implementation of the hero's journey on screen right up there on the screen. But you can't wait around 17 minutes to introduce your main character. Your main character's got to be there in the beginning, especially because you got to capture people in the first 10 minutes and so forth and so on, especially if you're trying to sell a script. You can't wait around to introduce your character. And so I said, so what's happening here? And we took a deep dive yesterday into really what happens in that first 17 minutes. And the reason that first 17 minutes is working is because that first 17 minutes of the story does tell you the hero's journey. It tells you the hero's journey, except for you are watching during that first 17 minutes, you are seeing Act 1 of the hero's journey and into Act 2. You're watching the Act 1 of the hero's journey and into Act 2 of the hero's journey playing out with R2-D2 as the hero. So it's hitting all of the story beats, but it's doing it with R2-D2 as the hero. And then we do something rather strange here at 17 minutes in. We hand the story off from R2-D2 to Luke Skywalker, and we restart the story. We start over telling the hero's journey. We start it over, except for we tell it with Luke Skywalker. And we got up to minute 17 last time when we were going to introduce Luke Skywalker, which is the start of Luke Skywalker's story. So if you subtract the time of the credits and things like that, so this is like 119 minutes. So I forget what we're saying here. And if you subtract 17, so actually there's only 102 minutes. Even though it's a 2-hour movie, Luke Skywalker's story is told in 102 minutes of that story, of that movie. So It moves fast, and if you're wondering, so if you were just looking at 2 hours and you're wondering what's going on at a quarter of the way through this movie, at halfway through the movie, at 75% of the way through the movie, well, it's gonna look like things are moving slow and behind. But as soon as you realize you can basically ignore the first 17 minutes of the movie when you're talking about the hero's journey structure for Luke Skywalker, well, then once you've done that, then boy, once again, the editing kicks in and you are hitting all of the major beats, like right on, what's happening halfway through, what's happening a quarter of the way through, what's happening 3/4 of the way through, and all of a sudden you're hitting that very well. We're going to talk about Han. I wanted to talk about, we'll talk about Han, but we'll talk about Luke Skywalker here and what he is doing. But I wanted to go back and add something about the end of the Droids Act 1. So the crossing of the threshold right here, the crossing of the threshold and the threshold guardian. So, and what happens here? So the accepting of the call of the adventure, we said, is displayed through C-3PO because R2-D2 is a willing hero. It's C-3PO who balks at accepting the danger he balks at accepting the danger. He balks at accepting the call to adventure. We hear him articulate that. We just get through the motions and R2-D2's actions, what he's up to, because of course R2-D2 doesn't talk. When you see the escape pod from outside, they are on their way. They are on their way, and that escape pod ride ends Act 1 for the droids. We go into a traditional scene. We did talk about arguably. So in another world, you probably could have put Leia on that pod. If you're talking about a different story, you probably could have put Leia on that escape pod. She could have grabbed the plans, and then she would have taken the escape pod. Now, if she takes the escape pod, though, Darth Vader's going down to Tatooine. Because we said we needed some major reason why our great warrior who really wants to get these plans is not going to go down to Tatooine. If Leia goes on that, for sure, the reason he doesn't go is because he's got to deal with Leia. But if Leia were on that escape pod, Darth Vader would go down to Tatooine. But I said arguably there needed to be another reason why the droids were not destroyed on the escape pod, because the reason that it wasn't, why not the Death Star, the Star Destroyer battery didn't shoot, was not driven or caused by any particular character. And this is important if you're thinking about this scene, because the Star Destroyer battery is the threshold guardian. There's some type of guardian or something that the hero has to overcome in order to make the transition from Act 1 to Act 2. This manifests in several different ways. Sometimes, and I think it is the person who is holding the person down. Sometimes it could be the person who is holding the hero's back or the hero back in mundane, boring life. And you have to get past that person in order to get into the other world. This might be more the case in non-action beginnings. We never actually see who is kind of keeping the droids in mundane everyday life. Later, we come up with this name when C-3PO says, our last master was Captain Antilles. So it's probably Captain Antilles, but that part is skipped. Like, who's holding them back is kind of skipped here. You just see them very quickly in their mundane life walking around the blockade runner. With Luke Skywalker does not start on action. So we're seeing the Act 1 of the hero's journey and some of Act 2 with the droids played out twice in this movie. Once with an action start and once with a non-action start. The R2-D2 has the action start. Luke Skywalker has the non-action start. Okay, so this may be more of the case. You may have overcoming the person who is holding you back more in non-action beginnings. It's been a while since I've seen or read Harry Potter, but it could be like who is holding Harry Potter back and keeping him in a mundane existence the Dursleys, right? So is it true? You can let me know in the comments. So and we start on non-action with Harry Potter. We start on non-action with Harry Potter. So overcoming the Dursleys, he's got to overcome the Dursleys in order to get out and go into Act 2, which is when he goes to Diagon Alley, right? So like he has to overcome the Dursleys. In action sequences, in action beginnings, this is more likely this is the hypothesis here is more likely to be some kind of combatant, and that's the case here. It's that Death Star battery, and so but the R2D2, so it should be R2D2. R2D2 should have done something active. R2 should have done something active in order to. Here's the rain again. If for some reason my power goes out or internet goes down or something like that, I live out here in the country, so it's possible. We'll just have to pick it up tomorrow or something, I guess. So R2D2 should have had done something active in order to disable the laser battery, turbo laser battery, or whatever it is. That shows you he can be a hero. This might be less important. One of the reasons that we might get away with in this case, because it's not like everything has to have everything. I'm just saying that here's something that in this case is non-standard in Star Wars, and it's this scene, and I think that's probably one of the weaker ones, but it goes by fast. And it's also probably okay because Luke Skywalker is going to become our main character anyway. It might be less important if the hero is willing, because this is, especially if the hero is unwilling and is kind of lame, then the overcoming the threshold guardian is really what's going to show you that they can be a hero. The writer's journey over here makes actually a lot out of the threshold guardian. Let me look for a particular passage here. The threshold guardian. He says, okay, the purpose of this is to test the hero. Testing the hero is the primary dramatic function of the threshold guardian. Threshold guardians challenge and test heroes on the path. It's important for a hero to recognize and acknowledge these figures as a threshold guardian. In daily life, you probably encounter resistance when you try to make a positive change in your life. People around you, even who you love, are often reluctant to see you change. They are used to your neuroses and have found a way to benefit from them. The idea of changing them may threaten them. And that's why I think that often, perhaps, especially in the non-action start situations, who is it that's benefiting from your neuroses and potentially does not want you to change and resist? Well, it's could be your threshold. It's your threshold guardian, and that could be the person who's keeping you down in ordinary life. Owen Lars is clearly benefiting from this for Luke. So you could say that Owen Lars is the guy who's keeping Luke down, keeping him on the farm, obviously benefiting from Luke, doesn't want him to change and become who he can actually be. So later, Owen Lars would be somebody who's could potentially be a threshold guardian that Luke is going to have to overcome. And Owen Lars would be his test, that if he can get past Owen, then he can get out into the world. Just like, okay, if Harry Potter can overcome the Dursleys. But on the other hand, he says, in similar fashion, villains of stories, this is often an underling of the villain. In more action-packed starts, threshold guardians are not usually the main villain. So Darth Vader is not the threshold guardian here, or the main antagonist. Often they are lieutenants of the villain, lesser thugs or mercenaries hired to guard access to the chief's headquarters. They may be neutral figures or simply part of the landscape in the special world. Well, that's exactly what we have. It is a mercenary hired thug. That's the gunners at the turbo laser battery. In similar fashion, villains of stories rely on underlings such as doorkeepers, because you're going through a threshold, bouncers, bodyguards, sentries, gunslingers, and mercenaries to protect and warn a hero as they are approaching the threshold. So that is so the idea of mercenary, of thug, of somebody, of underling of the main villain. That's exactly what is going on here with the Star Destroyer battery. The vehicle of the flight. Now, here's something that I have not heard talked about. The vehicle of the flight. I'm going to go to the comments, though, and see what's going on. Because even though we don't see a battle here, we actually get the same result. And this becomes very significant. I think the vehicle that you're taking from Act 1, that's going to help you cross the threshold from Act 1 into Act 2 is very important. And it often has very certain characteristics. Let me see what's going on in the comment section. Well, lots of stuff going on in the comment section. Oh, he doesn't. I haven't read the whole thing yet. He says, going back to the book, he makes a point on how art is not the goal of writing or other media. It's the result of needing to create. Good morning, Tomocrat. Retro Nerd Girl says, without desire, it's hard to identify with the characters. Rogue Thinker says the theatrical release, most of why it follows the structure so well is because explanations of structure, use it as a template. Well, but it also is structured, but it is also structured according to a template, a structure itself. And sometimes it might be surprising if you see the same elements of a story in a movie that are occurring at about, or two different movies or three different movies that are occurring at about the same time. But actually all movies are, or not, a lot of movies are about the same length anyway. We're talking about 90 minutes to 2 hours, and, adventure stories and science fiction and fantasy sometimes are on the longer side, the 2-hour side. So a lot of movies are about that length. And if you're doing something like creating a hero, we know exactly how to create a hero. We do that with the hero's journey. And so it doesn't surprise me that in a environment or a type of, I guess we will say, art form, we're sitting here talking about art. If we're talking about story, then that the same beats happen at almost the exact same time. So that's not, because some people are like, oh my God, did this person plan out basically doing the same thing at the exact same time in the movie? No, they probably didn't. That's probably the result of following the structure that works. Oh, Retro Nerd Girls says, I'm intensely studying Star Wars 2. It's connected with all walks of life. Well, this is perfect then. Good morning, Michael Connor. R2-D2's Act 3 and Luke's Act 1 overlap. Well, I don't. Oh, you're talking about at the end of the movie? Okay, I mean, I could see that because we're about to basically stop R2-D2's story. Rogue Thinker says, indeed, it's very different from what was even filmed. Is the editing the real creation of the story? No, I don't think so. I think that Brianna has said this, and she got this from someplace. I forget where, but I think that she has said, and like I said, she got this from someplace, but I'm not sure where, that a story is told, that a movie is told 3 times, or I guess it could be a TV show too, that it's told 3 times. The first time the story is told is in the script. The first time it's told is on the script. The second time it's told is actually during production when people are actually, rolling the cameras. And then the third time it's told is in the editing room. So it gets kind of built 3 times. So I wouldn't say that the editing is the real creation. I mean, it's the final step that's actually, the final process, the editing process is what actually, tells you what exactly the final product is going to be. But I wouldn't say that one's more real. I wouldn't use the word real, because there are the writing of the structure, the writing of the script, and then the creation during production is both also real. But this book, The Writer's Bible, the Screenwriter's Bible, which I was going through as well, and realized I hadn't read as much as I should, so I was checking this out before I got back to it as well. This one says, does talk about how important the writer's job is to provide structure, because the structure is really what's going to be seen and endure throughout all of those processes, the production and then the editing. Well, the hero's journey wasn't created until people looked back at many stories and saw common threads in the tale of great stories. Well, or was that a recognition of the hero's journey? Was it created then, or was it recognized? I wouldn't say that it was created then. I would say that it was recognized as something once people looked back, but I wouldn't say that's when it was created. Whoa. Okay. Starting over. Focus. Okay. Yeah, if Leia's on that pod, they detect the last life forms and blast out of the sky. If Leia gets on the life pod, then that's her threshold guardian, and she has to be active in its defeat. She has to do something to actively defeat the threshold guardian. Like I talked about last time, like introducing a computer virus into the Star Destroyer that temporarily disables its weapon systems or causes it, certain portions to lose power or something like that. So she would need to be agentive in making sure that she can escape. Lady of Pain, good morning. I'm not sure if we have, if I've seen you on the chat before. I might have, but anyway, here's to you. It's a good time to take a break and take an extra sip. Okay. I'll go back to the comments here in just one moment, but this is also, before I do the vehicle of the flight, this is an idea. And I asked Lou about this and yesterday, and I asked him if this was his idea or if it had come from someplace else. And he explained the idea, but now I'm realizing he didn't actually tell me whether that was his idea or somebody else's. It might be his idea. So this is idea from Lou, because he had sent me this idea, and this is in my back of my mind because of this from Lou, but it may not be. Lou told me this. It may be his idea, or it may come from something else. Somebody may recognize it here. But here is also an idea, or the idea here, which can be useful, important. It could be important here. It can be important elsewhere as well. But if you're trying to have a challenge, like a physical challenge to overcome in a heroic story, is when the swords are blasters and stuff like that. What is important is that heroes often don't go from zero to hero. And I think this is an interesting realization. This is something that could be used right here. Heroes, are protagonists, or I'll use the word protagonist right here. Protagonists are often almost heroes already when we meet them. Now, not always, I don't think, but when we meet them. They are really good at something. But that whatever they're good at, but whatever that is not appreciated where they are. And isn't that the way a lot of us feel? This is a feeling connection to a lot of people. Well, most of us are good at something. I mean, most people have something they're good at, but whatever it is you're good at may not be valued where you are. This connection to people who often feel misunderstood. I'm so good at this, whatever that is, but in the environment that I'm in, I'm just so misunderstood. If I were in the right environment, then I would really flourish. So, for example, Luke is not at zero when we meet him. He is a great pilot. Interestingly, when we meet Anakin, and I have a lot more critiques of the A New Hope, but also when we meet Anakin, if we're going to try to turn him into a great hero, he's not at zero either. He's also a great pilot. Luke is not at zero when we meet him. He is a great pilot. Another great example. It's not it's here, but How to Train Your Dragon is a great example. Hiccup is already a master inventor when we see him. But the problem is Luke is a great pilot, but he's just here on this moisture farm. Hiccup is a master inventor, but Vikings and his father do not value that. Okay. So if you need, so my hypothesis here is that if you need the hero to be able to do something, well, if you think, well, gee, if they're just lame, if they're zeros when they start off, we got to go from zero to hero. Well, how are we going to do that? No. I mean, if he's got to be a zero, if he's got to be this really lame person, and then we got to overcome a threshold guardian, well, how do we do that? Well, now that connects me to what Lou was saying, that, well, they're actually good at something. So you rely on that which they are good at. Harry Potter, this is what he's excellent at is introduced later. Harry Potter is excellent at Quidditch. I think that's how you spell that. He's not even all that great at magic. That comes later, but it introduces his idea that he's great at Quidditch. Not early, not Act 1. He doesn't use that. He doesn't use Quidditch to overcome the Threshold Guardian. But even there, not all these things have to be in exact same order. They're just present. But this is one possibility about overcoming a Threshold Guardian. The vehicle of the flight, life pod, is important. It goes by fast because it's not really important for story purpose. This goes back to plot versus story. All we need in a good story is emotionally satisfying explanation to accept it. But if it's my point here is that this movie is starting R2D2 off as a hero, and if you're trying to tell a hero's journey based on what is going on here, and you're watching this first 17 minutes, the realization is that R2D2 is the hero. And sure, yes, you can get by. You don't have to do everything. We talk about that and reordering things in the hero's journey and structures and the different ways that certain archetypes appear and things like that. But if you're trying to create particularly a hero himself who is unwilling and needs to be agentive, that's that story beat. And you don't want that happen. In that case, if that's going to be your central character, you don't want that. You want to make him agentive. Good morning, Andrew. Good morning. RPG with DVJ says, you're helping me prep for my interview with Douglas Burton and the Heroine's Labyrinth. Yes. So we'll put out a link to that when you got it. But I think Doug said that like next Thursday, is it right? Doug's going to be on DVJ's channel. So if you want to click DVJ's channel link there and subscribe, Doug's going to be on next week. Obi-Wan completes his goal when he delivers his message to Obi-Wan. That's his resolution. And during Act 1, before he even accepted the call. Oh, okay. So, yeah. So, Obi-Wan, his task, we're going to come back to the fact that Leia is on a side quest. He's got to pick up Obi-Wan Kenobi. Because she should have told, like, we're not exactly sure why we're on the side quest. We don't think about that. I've never thought about that. Until this passed through Star Wars. We're never really told because she needs to get those plans to Alderaan, which we did talk about that later. So the way that she should have tasked R2D2 was get these plans to my father on Alderaan. You got to get to Alderaan. But for some reason it's not. In this one there's a subquest here. That get this to Obi-Wan Kenobi, and then Obi-Wan Kenobi is going to take it to Obi-Wan. Wait, what did I say? I must have said something strange. I don't even know. All right. All right. Right. He's already bullseyeing Womp Rats in his old T16 back home. Yes. Okay. So we're going to get to Luke here next, but the final thing I want to say is this vehicle of the flight, because it occurred to me that even though the life pod is not fired upon, the result is almost the same anyway. Because, okay, as we said, if the life pod is fired upon, then that's going to end your movie right there. So you have to have some reason the life pod is not fired upon. But I think more generally we can say if the threshold guardian stops the hero at the end of Act 1, every movie's over. You know, if you've got the threshold guardian, like many of the movies are, if the hero's got something they've got to overcome in order to get into Act 2, we can generalize and say if the threshold guardian is successful, then the movie stops right there. You're not going anywhere if the threshold guardian is successful. So that's the case in all situations. So there's got to be some reason to escape, some reason that the hero is able to get past the threshold guardian and continue the story. Generally speaking, that's always true. And oftentimes, if it is an escape, if you're moving through a threshold, actually a door like R2-D2 and C-3PO do, the vehicle that they escape in is important, because you ask yourself, why is it that R2 and C-3PO and 3PO, R2 and 3PO cannot get in an X-Wing? Don't get into an escape pod. Get into an X-Wing. They're droids. They need a craft with sensors and engines, and even warp drive or hyperdrive. Because hey, how are they going to get to Alderaan? They need a place for Obi-Wan Kenobi. When they fly down to Obi-Wan Kenobi, Obi-Wan Kenobi's got to get in that craft in order to go, and jump into hyperspace and get to Alderaan. But they need crafts with engines, even hyperdrive, and atmospheric flight capabilities like X-Wings apparently have. Because if R2 knows where Kenobi is, he needs to fly there in a starship, a starfighter, or whatever kind of thing it is, starfighter. But he doesn't. Okay, so again, you can't give him that. If you give him a fully capable vehicle of passing the threshold from Act 1 to Act 2, the movie's also going to be short-circuited, because especially if R2-D2 is going right to Leia's father on Alderaan. If this were going on Alderaan, you could also write this to have this going on Alderaan, above Alderaan. Get this to my father. He's in the Capitol Palace, or whatever. Well, R2-D2, hey, give him a very capable starfighter and let him fly there. But no, he has the perfect craft to get him out of immediate danger, but cannot take him farther. You see, when Act 2 begins, the life pod has crashed. Immediate danger over, immediate danger clear. But now you're going on a long road, but the vehicle can take you no further. And I think this is important. The vehicle can take you no further. If you wanted to give him a starfighter, so here's another way you could have done it. If you've got a hero or something like that, if somebody jumps in, we talked about disabling the laser cannons remotely. But if you wanted to give this other character, maybe Luke Skywalker is on board the blockade runner. And like I said, if you want this movie to be about Luke Skywalker and you want to start on action, and we're going to come back to this point later, but you put Luke Skywalker on board the blockade runner. I know that's exactly what would be said if the script comes back. That's exactly what Cameron would say. I know. If you wrote this, like, who's the main character here? Luke Skywalker. Oh, so what's this about? Luke Skywalker's got to get this droid to the Rebel base. Okay, well then Luke Skywalker needs to be on board that blockade runner, and Princess Leia needs to tell him, take these plans to the Rebel base. That's what needs to happen. And then then Luke Skywalker would have to escape the Threshold Guardian, and he could actually, in that case, he could, because you know that he's already a great pilot. Well, guess what you would need? You would need a great pilot. Okay, so Luke, if it were Luke Skywalker, then Luke Skywalker would get in a starfighter. He would get in his T-16. I gotta get out of here. I can get on my T-16 and I can use my ability as a pilot to escape the T-16, to escape the Death Star batteries. So if you wanted to give him a starfighter, you could, and then you could have even a battle sequence if he was good at not only being in battle, but target. Yeah, like Luke Skywalker would. I'm good at targeting Womp Rats back home. Well, use his Womp Rat targeting ability to take out the battery. All this would have to be right. This is the first kind of pass here. This is what would be happening. You could have that happen, and potentially there more action. If you want more action in this part of the story, because like I said, we're at a low part. We're at, not low. Like low from the perspective of the oscillation of action at the moment. But if your script is structured, so you need something higher here. If you want that, you could have that happen and potentially have a fight or more action to escape the Threshold Guardian. But what would be even more exciting than that? But rather than having Luke or the character, whoever it is, the hero, then fly off in a fully functional starship, add drama by having the hero only almost escape and have his craft be majorly damaged in that escape. That would, if you're trying to add agentivity to that moment, that's how you would do that. Even if it were an X-Wing that Luke jumped in or something like that and then shot a couple of things on his way out, he only barely does it. But have one of the engines of that T-16 or that X-Wing get blown off. So he gets by. And again, in that case, your starfighter only was allowing you to get by exactly the immediate danger. But then in that case, it's so damaged, I got to make a crash landing on the planet. And so where does that start off again? Exactly the place where the droids start off again, with our heroes on the other world in a different place, without their magic vehicle, without the vehicle of escape. I'm hypothesizing you're going to see characteristics, that exact same characteristics of the vehicle over and over again. In a lot of stories, if you're escaping a Threshold Guardian, especially in a chase scene. Let me go to the comments. Let's see. Lady of Pain says, Heath, the Nemesis engine is better than most modern storytelling in most games. Do others know about Nemesis? I'm not sure what you mean. I don't. Let's see. Robert says, but the droids couldn't hire a ship to get to Alderaan. They couldn't even get to the pilot's bar. Yeah, an X-wing would have been shot at. So that would have been an action sequence. TSL Frontman says, yeah, an X-wing definitely would have been shot at. However, yeah, so you would have had an action sequence as the crossing of the threshold. Especially now, see, the reason you might want to do that is if you had depicted whoever is on that blockade runner's got to get away as particularly pathetic, and you need to actually show the audience they're capable of being a hero. You would do this in a. Well, I know. So, but if you're reconstructing everything, there are no X-wings on board the blockade runner, but whatever the equivalent would be. So this is a great way. I mean, so if you just say, okay, there are no X-wings, it's got to be a life pod. My point is, it doesn't matter that you construct both of those in the same way. You could use the overcoming the threshold guardian. You can do that in different ways, but guess what? The result would be the same. The result would be that they're going to end up crashed. If it's the life pod, there's not going to be a fight. You're going to go down there. You probably disabled the laser cannon a different way, and you end up crashed on the planet. If it's an X-wing, then you're probably going to have a fight sequence here, or a more dramatic kind of sequence, escaping those blasters, those laser guns, which you probably blast away. But what's going to happen? The X-wing, because it's going to be shot at, exactly, is going to be damaged, and you're still end up crashed on the planet. Both of those vehicles would serve the same purposes, and it's whether or not you want action at this moment or not. Well, okay, make it a T-16. Okay, I mean everybody here knows all the ships. I mean, you can, if you're writing this, you can make this the Tantive 4 be whatever you want it to be. If it needed to be carrying some other type of ship, then a small hangar with some other type of ship, or and it would have. We don't want to get caught up on the lore of Star Wars as it's been developed and say, well, the reason it's not is because this particular type of blockade runner can't carry because it would have been changed. Lady of Pain says, no hero adversary upsets me more than threshold guardians looking at you, Wizards of the Coast. Now, James says they must use stealth, misdirection, and subterfuge to win. They cannot confront directly. That is often a characteristic of overcoming threshold guardians. Yes. Okay, so I think now those were my notes there. Now we are at 17 minutes into the film. Luke's story begins. We restart the hero's journey. And I think it's really ironic here that, you hear people say, well, the structure, if you're talking about the structure of storytelling in movies, that, oh man, so actually you're saying that we tell the same story over and over and over again, just in new ways. And I say that's true. We tell the same story over and over again in different ways. And people come back to hear the same story over and over and over again, but told in different ways. But you are telling them the same story. And many people won't even realize that they're being told the same story. Most people won't realize that. But in this case, I think this is an extremely important thing to realize here, because it's so true that you want to hear the same stories. And if they're done in different ways, you can actually tell the exact same story in back-to-back 15 to 17 minutes of a movie, and people won't even notice. Because I never hear this talked about. I never hear this talked. In all the stuff we got in the hero's journey, I've never seen this brought up. Like I said, it may be the case this is what Drake is talking about. But we restart the hero's journey with Luke as our hero. And we rerun the whole sequence that R2-D2 just went through, except for, of course, we're telling it differently, because instead of being nondescript robot on board a starship, now we have Farm Boy in the desert. But we do the exact same things. We set everything up again. We start the hero's journey with Luke as our hero, and start what's going to become most of this film right here. Start in everyday life. We have that. Let me bring up on my screen the despecialized edition. Well, hold on. Oh, right here. Okay. So we are now at 17 minutes. Starting everyday life, where, as Doug has brought up, where there's a claim on Luke's labor. Luke wants adventure, everyday life, where Luke wants adventure, but there's a claim on his labor. Working on the farm, and his uncle is keeping him down. And keeping him down and back. And so that's the way that we introduce Luke Skywalker, as Luke Skywalker and his uncle are going to go buy the droids. So we're seeing, mundane life. We're conducting this transaction. This is when the story gets handed off. We talked about the red droid last time. And then Luke has to take the droids and then go. And actually, as soon as we see this, as soon as we go inside, Luke is flying the model of his T-16 Skyhopper. Skyhopper, right before he starts manual labor again. He starts labor to help out the droids, right? To get them prepared for whatever it is that, the day's work ahead or whatever. And then he finds out that these droids have a connection to the adventure that he wants to have, and he's about to have his inciting incident. And I know that some people don't like, it turns out some people don't like this idea of the inciting incident. And, how do you spell inciting incident? Inciting incident. But this is not the call to adventure. This is not the call to adventure. This is not a call to adventure. But it is what kicks off the story and makes Luke's life never the same. Just like, I suppose, the inciting incident in R2-D2 story was all of a sudden the Star Destroyer, I guess, dropping out of hyperspace and attacking them. That was big. That's starting on action. We're not starting on action here. You're not just coming down here. And okay, and in this story, we are not starting on action. This gives us a way. We don't. We ease into Luke in this part. So you get to see a different way to tell this. And this inciting incident, this is when he's working on R2-D2, when he discovers Princess Leia's message. And he even physically jolts back. As he's trying to work something out here, and even physically jolts back as this happens. He had an inciting incident. It physically knocked him off his feet. Rocked him back, threw him on the floor. Oh my God! Boom! And Luke physically falls down at the exact instant that we have the inciting incident. That's when his life changes forever. He's physically rocked by it, and then he sees the message from Princess Leia. And this is one of these situations where in here, we take advantage of the fact that we have both technology and magic in this movie. And we're going to talk about technology here that's going to allow this connection to be made with Luke that otherwise would be hard to make. If you didn't have the kind of technology that they have here, this would be more difficult to make. Let me go over here. Lady of Pain says, this process is called a treatment in Hollywood. Script consultants earn good money for doing this. And we're getting it free here. Let's see. It has been a long time since I have seen The Matrix. So does The Matrix begin does it begin the same way? I would have to watch it again in order to comment directly or make any kind of definitive statements. But yes, we open on action there. So if the pattern here is, okay, if you want your hero to be a slow burn, so that's true that Neo is a slow opening as a hero. So if you're going to have him be a slow opening, then you've got to have some kind of other action being someplace, and that is definitely Trinity, as I remember. I wonder how long it is before you see Neo in the film. I think that goes faster. I think I'll have to watch again. That's an excellent question. I'm going to put a note in here to go back and look at that. Does The Matrix start in the same way? I bet it's possible that we see a lot of similarities, but I bet it also moves faster. So it could be that it uses the prologue, but actually more effective on time. I've got to check on that. That's an excellent question. Leia doesn't have an escort to communicate a lack of resources to the audience. It's actually pretty important in establishment, even though the point is no longer relevant. Oh. Technology made a great substitute for low magic in the setting. Oh, that may be in reference to Planescape. I think people are talking about Planescape in the comments. Yeah, that's that sequence. Yeah, so that opens on action. Okay, so in the Matrix, the opening sequence is only about 5 minutes or so before it gets to Neo. That would be more like what I would guess or would have guessed. The Matrix is also used in the same way. The Matrix might be interesting to look at. It has been a long time since I've seen it, but I bet it's gonna start on action, somebody else's action, move faster. Looking, and Luke sees Leia. Luke, the important part is sees. And he is enthralled. What do guys like Luke, which is a lot of us, right, often want? An adventure and a girlfriend. What motivates people? What motivates guys like Luke? Guys of prime military age? What motivates Luke? Well, adventure and girls. But mainly girls. Which one of those is going to win out? So which one of these is more important? Which one of these is more important to Luke? And right now we have not introduced the idea. We don't know that that R2-D2 is carrying the plans. I mean, the perfect, everything has fallen into Luke's hands. He has the plans. He doesn't know that right now, but he has the plans, putting him at the center of the war going on. The exact one that he wants to be a part of. And have an adventure. And who should give him this message? Who should tell him that? A beautiful woman. I mean, that's everything you need, right? All of a sudden, one day, a beautiful woman falls into your life in an inciting incident. You've got a beautiful woman that shows up, and she is telling you that you are now all of a sudden in the middle of the war that's going on, and you're a key in it, and that's exactly what you want to do anyway. So and it's even a beautiful woman tells you here, uh-oh. There is no beautiful woman here. There is a strange-looking droid. We only got a strange-looking droid in here. This would be you could do it this way, but you understand why this is better, to incorporate the beautiful woman with the message of importance to these things. You put both of these things together. Especially, motivating here the adventure, or mainly girls, especially if once we find out that she's in danger. especially once we find out she's in danger. Even to the point of possibly, Princess Leia is an important person, but even to the point of possibly jeopardizing, because that was a very risky mission to go and try to get her out of the Death Star jail, the Death Star prison, possibly jeopardizing the war to rescue her. That's how motivating this is. But what happens when you only have this strange-looking droid here, and you don't have the beautiful woman to deliver the message? Technology the rescue. Hologram time. Luke can see the princess. Guys are visual. Luke can see the princess and her beauty, even though she's not there. If you're not going to have, you're going to have a more difficult time with this, making a plot like this work, if you don't have this technology and or some kind of magical element to allow this hero to see the beautiful woman at the same time she's delivering her quest. Because even if R2-D2 said, hey, I'm on a mission for the rebellion, I got to go to this guy called Obi-Wan Kenobi. You could do that. That is an inciting incident. And we could potentially write the story from that direction and go with that, except for the fact it's much better if there's also a gorgeous woman in this situation delivering it to them. But the problem is she's already captured. So how can we possibly have Luke see her when he's on this planet and she's on board this Star Destroyer racing toward the Death Star? Technology. That's what allows this. That's what allows both of those things to happen. Let's think about the Matrix right here. Just a Matrix note. Who makes the call to adventure? To Neo? A beautiful woman. That is Trinity. But even before that, the inciting incident, isn't that Follow the White Rabbit? When he comes to the door, even before that, that's the inciting incident, right? I'm kind of pulling this off the top of my head because I haven't seen it in a while. But the inciting incident is Follow the White Rabbit. And that rabbit tattoo is on a beautiful woman. You know, she leans over, whatever, and you see her, and then you see the white rabbit. Women motivating men. So that is that point right there. So same thing. So we actually get to see Luke be enthralled by Princess Leia, and we're not worried about. At this point, I don't even think the idea was. I mean, one of the worst ideas in Star Wars was to end up having Luke and Leia be brother and sister, and that's not the case in this movie. Leia is clearly, a love interest for both Luke and Han, and then that's their love going to be their triangle, right? So we got beautiful women motivating men. Right. Okay. So, right. TSL Frontman says it wouldn't have landed nearly as well as if he had just found an unsigned message in a bottle. Yeah. Great. That's another great point. Exactly. If they just, if she had put the plans into a metaphorical bottle and just said, I'm going to hope for the best and fling them out, and some kind of atmospherically shielded thing, and that lands on Luke's farm. I mean, something like that could have happened. And then Luke could have looked at it and then, oh my God, look, I got plans. But then he still wouldn't have been able to see the beautiful woman. She's a beautiful woman in need. Yes. Yep. Because I guess I implied the in need. Later, she's going to be in danger. She's in the point of rescue. But a beautiful woman, who's telling that a beautiful woman in need? I guess over here, the point of in need is implied because, but it's good to call that out specifically. It is a beautiful woman in need. And her need is the quest that she's got to have fulfilled. So the Herald. So, no, okay. So the herald in these kinds of stories. So I would say look for, and I'm going to, so the hypothesis here, and I will look for this, look for, and it's interesting, we just got this out of the Matrix right here too. Look for the herald, and the herald is the one who calls the, look for the herald who calls the hero to adventure to be a beautiful woman in need. Like often when the hero is male, particularly of military age, and so forth. So that's probably something that's going to show up a lot. Probably something that's going to show up quite a bit. That's my guess. And it does in Matrix. So beautiful woman in need. But critically, okay. This is more Star Trek, Star Wars weirdness. This is some Star Wars weirdness. But critically, this is not, we already said, this is not the call to adventure. We hadn't gotten that yet. This is the inciting incident. At this moment, Leia does not call Luke to adventure. Okay. It lets him know something's up. It's changing his life forever at this moment. Help me, Obi-Wan Kenobi. You're my only hope. She's not saying help me, Luke. This is kind of a weird part of this, because she's not saying help me, Luke. She is saying help me, Obi-Wan Kenobi. Now this becomes very iconic. I mean, this becomes very iconic. Help me, Obi-Wan Kenobi. You're my only hope. This is a call to Kenobi. It gets Luke interested. But it's not calling him specifically to adventure. He starts to investigate and he starts to ask questions around his uncle, right? That's what's going to happen in the next scene. But we're seeing a call to adventure. We're seeing this message being delivered to Obi-Wan Kenobi. Leia has played the part of herald to R2-D2. She assigned, so a beautiful woman in need did assign R2-D2 his quest. Does that ever happen to Luke? Interesting. How, if you wanted to start on action, so let's say you got to write this faster. Let's say you're writing this script and like the idea, you turn this in, and we got R2-D2 running around, and now we're finally, wait a minute, we got to do this faster. So if somebody says, if we want to do this faster, let me go to the comments. If we want to do this faster, what do we do? That's where I'll stop off right here. I think I was going through the comments when I was talking about beautiful woman in need. Regarding the damsel in distress, many noirs begin this way. There's a curiosity to it as well for the protagonist and the audience. Will he rescue her? Visual storytelling, which movies are, visual storytelling requires, Lady of Pain is saying, requires physical and tangible heroic goals. There are 18 short-term hero goals that pair with the hero's journey. Oh, I thought someone might do that. Sable Phoenix says that the opening sequence of The Matrix is 6 minutes and 35 seconds. Not 17 minutes. You're right. You're right. Yeah. The red pill, blue pill moment is probably, is probably the call to, I was thinking about him meeting Neo. We'll have to look at that in more. I was thinking about her meeting Neo in the club. Doesn't she, what does she do in the club? She encourages him to like get in the car or something like that. So that's kind of Harold-like. I'll have to look this. R2-D2 is, well, you mentioned, Robert, this idea of the messenger before, and I said I was working with this idea of the messenger, but it's a difficult fit. So because of the weird part of the technology of this, you could say that R2-D2 is going to be the herald to Obi-Wan Kenobi. But it's really Leia. It's Leia communicating through R2-D2. Hey, Doug. Right. Yes. Leia allowed herself to be captured to buy time for R2 to deliver the plans to Obi-Wan Kenobi. Yes, I think it's also implied. You could make that more explicit, and I think that oftentimes making that more explicit, having her sacrifice herself, which is what would allow, for instance, the big bad dark warrior, in this case Darth Vader, to not go down after the plans, and also potentially that can be a part of overcoming the Threshold Guardian. The call to adventure in the Matrix is the White Rabbit. So in that case, we're also associating it with the beautiful woman. The story, so Retro Nerd Girl says the story could just start in the desert with the two droids walking away from the crash. Well, and there's some stuff after the crash that, like, getting them captured. Oh, by the way, the Deputy Herald, right, yeah. Actually, that's kind of a good way to think of it. Yes. We're going to talk about this as well. We do have the attacked R2 attacked by Jawas. This is actually an important point. If in that story, if R2D2 is going to be the main character, I actually think attacked by Jawas, I call it attacked by sand people, is the same scene as Luke being attacked by sand people. We're going to come back to the point. Luke being attacked by sand people. I think it fulfills the same purpose. It's the arc is more developed with Luke because we're wrapping up R2D2, but that's the same point. Attacked by R2D2 being attacked by Jawas and Luke Skywalker being attacked by sand people are the same scene. And we'll talk about why the attack by sand people is important later. We're still kind of far from that. How much time we got? A little bit more. Okay, but so if you want to do this faster, I can talk about that. Then Luke needs to be on board. On board the blockade runner. We'll probably bring this up again. Because, okay, well, is this a good time to talk about this? We can talk about it. Well, we'll talk about that later. But that's still the idea. That if you want to do this faster and start on action, then what you do is you put Luke on board the blockade runner. I've said that before, but we're returning to that point. So, Luke is awed by her. We get the conversation with Owen. We get who's keeping him down. The dinner sequence. We get the idea. We do have the idea that there is something special about Luke. His family and his father. This isn't just any farm boy. This is a special farm boy. Very classic, right? And then, okay, R2D2 is gone. R2D2 is gone. Luke goes to look for them. This is attacked by sand people. This sequence is a little bit out of place. I think this is the same thing as R2D2 being attacked by Jawas, but it is in a little bit different place in both of their arcs than ordinary. Because when R2D2 is attacked by Jawas, you're showing that R2D2 we know that he's out of his element. He's in that other world. And actually, the idea of liminal space came up, and I want to talk about that more too. I want to adopt that because I hadn't actually had that terminology in my notes. But the idea of the liminal space being even a transition. It's part of the other world, I guess, broadly speaking. But there will be a transitional area, maybe before you get into some of the core of the other world. Because so once Luke accepts the call to adventure, being on board the Millennium Falcon is kind of this liminal space, because the other world is really the Death Star. But we are attacked by Sand People. Is this necessary? Cameron was saying it's not. He's saying attacked by Sand People, not necessary, which is kind of funny. You know, in the grand scheme of things, being attacked by Sand People, not necessary. Luke is not out of Act 1 yet, but this is showing you that there is danger and he is out of his element. Actually, in this case, oh, this is an interesting idea. I'm going to put a note to myself here. Actually, it could be. I think this might show up twice, because the attack by Sand People and the attack by Jawas both have the same idea, and they both end up in the same way. But actually, if you're looking for the same moment for Luke, that actually is in the right place, because R2-D2 has already entered his second act. Luke enters his second act and goes to the cantina. After the second act is is being roughed up by that guy at the bar. Is being roughed up by that guy at the bar. That may be why Cameron says being attacked by Sand People is not necessary here. Says the Sand People attack is not necessary. But in both of Luke's instances, who gets him out of that situation? Obi-Wan Kenobi. Obi-Wan Kenobi appears both after Sand People attack Luke, and the Jawas attack Luke, and the Jawas attack R2. They're fallen. Both characters fall. R2 does the clank, over. Luke is fallen out and unconscious. Both characters fall. Need help. R2-D2 is captured, but with Luke, Luke receives supernatural aid. Luke is out of his element. He can't handle this problem on his own. So, especially in Act 2, this is why this is important for R2-D2, because R2-D2 would have theoretically already passed his test of the Threshold Guardian. So ordinarily, you would have had a hero who did something heroic that got himself out of danger and allowed him to pass the threshold of Act 1 into Act 2. So if he's done something heroic, we have him at a high then. That's going to be a high moment. He escapes that threshold, but then he used to be at a low moment. Okay, and now we're in another world. Now we're in another world that we can't handle. The moving across the threshold starts in a world where the hero is comfortable, like the spaceship, the technology of R2-D2. We're moving from the comfort to the uncomfortable. And then as soon as we get into the uncomfortable, this liminal space of the other world, the sand instead of the spaceship, we realize that the hero can now no longer help himself. So demonstrates, especially after a success or high of overcoming the Threshold Guardian, when placed in Act 2, that the hero still has a lot of work to do and cannot handle the problems of the other world or liminal space, whatever we want to call it. So this plays out twice here. We're about to introduce Luke's mentor. So I thought that it was very significant over here, and I'm going to separate. So I want to separate the idea of the mentor from the supernatural aid. I'm looking over here in the writer's journey over here, and because there's a table on page 6 that says comparison and outlines of terminology, the different terminology that Christopher Vogel uses over here, as opposed to what Campbell was using with A Hero of a Thousand Faces. And so, the terminology is a bit different for the different parts of the hero's journey. But I noticed that we've got crossing the first threshold. Meeting of the mentor. The writer's journey here uses the idea of meeting the mentor, but he pairs that with supernatural aid. Campbell calls that supernatural aid. They're meaning the same thing. But I actually think they're different. Now, in this case, Obi-Wan Kenobi, one character fulfills both of those. Obi-Wan Kenobi renders Luke supernatural aid in both the Sand People fight and the bar fight, chasing away the Sand People with magic and drawing a magic weapon against the bar guy, whoever that was. He renders supernatural aid. So you could, and then we go to meeting the mentor, and then takes him to his home, and then Kenobi takes him, Luke, home, and when he's with the Sand People. And that starts the mentorship arc right there. But you could definitely have a situation, I think, where if you're especially if your other world or your liminal space are really weird, you can get really weird right here, because now all of a sudden the hero has crossed the threshold and is now into Act 2, and then we need to get the hero into some kind of problem, especially if they have demonstrated capability in crossing the threshold and defeating the threshold guardian. All of a sudden we present them with a problem. My God, they're out of their element. They aren't as cool as we thought they were. They still have a lot to learn. They've got a problem they cannot handle. And the way that they are able to handle that problem is with supernatural aid that comes to them and aids them. And then often that supernatural aid leads into a mentorship arc that could be the same character that renders both, who renders the aid and becomes the mentor, as it is in this case. Or sometimes you would separate those two things. Like I was thinking, if you've got like a druid who's going to be the mentor, let's say you're going to use the mentor as like some kind of heroes coming into the other world, and you're going to have some kind of druid that's going to be the mentor for them. Okay. Well, you could have the druid show up and render the supernatural aid, just like is the case in Star Wars. Or you could have like all kinds of fairy, depending on how weird your other world is, all kinds of fairies and, forest creatures or whatever come up and render supernatural aid, and then lead the character to that druid and for the mentorship arc to begin. You could do that. So while he may be the case that Attack by Sand People is not many of these things are not strictly necessary, because we can play with them, we can move them around in different orders. But now I think I understand more of the reasoning behind the Attack by Sand People. Arguably, and I want to look this up. I'm going to make a note to myself here. Arguably, with R2-D2, Attack by Sand People, arguably, or possibly, note to self, possibly, the Attack by Jawas ends with could end with R2 in the belly of the whale. He is in a literal belly. He's in the belly of the Sandcrawler. And then we talked about how he would need supernatural aid. Supernatural aid to get out. If you were telling if you're going to continue a traditional story arc, a hero's journey story arc with R2-D2, once he's in the belly of that Sandcrawler, he would need supernatural aid. He would need to find that and a mentor inside there. That's when those moments would happen inside the Sandcrawler. Let's keep going because I was just planning on going like making this analysis through Act 1, and we're getting close to the end of Luke's Act 1. Luke starts the mentorship arc. Luke gets more information around here about his father. Luke gets more information about who he is. He is and receives a magic weapon. It connects him to his father. And his destiny, I guess. Magic weapon archetype, very important. Or, very important, but also, shows up all the time. Magic weapon archetype, very important. Very classic, I guess. I guess all archetypes are classic. But, in this type of story, it's not some, in some other story, it might be a locket or something like that. But in this type case, we got magic sword here. How much more classic can you get? Let me go over here because I've got more to say on the magic weapon. Let's see. Looking at the comments. Well, there's a lot going on. I'm not going to be able to read it all. Yeah, she's not. Leia is not. Yeah, when she confronts Darth Vader, when she arguably draws, she doesn't directly draw stormtroopers away. You could make that point more explicit if she directly drew the stormtroopers away so that R2-D2 could get out. If you wanted more action and more agentivity right there, that's what you would do. It's kind of implied that she, stays on that for that reason, but she could have explicitly done that. She could have, if you wanted, you could have had her explicitly draw the danger away from the droids. And in fact, that's probably what should have happened. They're showing danger away from home. Yes, this is regarding the Sand People and the Jawas that they cannot deal with. Right, exactly. The Sand People and the bar scene is that Luke can't handle himself outside, and he can't handle himself at the bar, and that's why he needs the supernatural aid. Yeah, they're preventing him, and so he needs the supernatural aid, and then comes up. And in this case, like I was saying, he is the mentor. He's embodying both. He's embodying supernatural aid. I think he's doing three things. He's about to do a third thing. He's embodying supernatural aid, mentor, and then do something else as well. Eric Edison talks about 6 short-term goals per act. Might have to check that out. Eric Edison at UCLA. Okay, we'll hold that thought, Punk Soup, on the Threshold Guardian. Oh, that's interesting. Luke was partially a Threshold Guardian when it came to the restraining bolt. That's an interesting point because R2-D2 kind of tricks him into taking it off, right? Oh yeah. The next thing, R2-D2 tricks Luke into removing it. Yeah. So, that's very interesting. Oh, that's very interesting. Let me put this over here. Someplace, wherever. Luke, R2-D2, and Vogel uses the idea that deception is often used to overcome. Well, deception was used to overcome the Threshold Guardian on this blockade runner because the deception was putting the droids on that. In this case, that's the way they went with that. Deception is often used to overcome Threshold Guardians. R2 overcomes Luke as a Threshold Guardian by removing by tricking him into removing the restraining bolt. Nice. He also offers Luke supernatural aid by giving him his father's lightsaber. Yes. Magic talisman. So don't know if we can separate them. Well, I guess it depends on. Yeah, I mean, if you're because if you're continuing that idea of supernatural aid here, I guess I am using that. I'm using my. It looks like my concept of the supernatural aid idea that I had in this context is narrower than this, and looks like James and looks like Doug are using a more expansive idea of that, because the supernatural aid step is specifically the mentor giving tools or inspiration to the hero. You can separate them. There's no reason why you couldn't. It leads to subversion. Yes, you're right. Handing over the lightsaber, that kind of stuff is aiding him. But twice he aided him in this case in very physical confrontations. Like there was obviously physical aid as well. But then you're right. Part of mentorship is the aid by learning and stuff like that. Yeah. So Doug seems to agree with that. But the wise mentor is indicative of the underworld where supernatural reality exists. The mentor knows of the other world, and providing supernatural aid reveals the other world to the hero. Yeah, Gandalf and Bilbo and Frodo, we should study that eventually. Yes, lightsabers I'm seeing over here. Okay, so yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, no, but you can't put lightsabers in something else, right? Because it's now so Star Wars. What I was going to say that this is with the to continue on the idea of the lightsabers, and I even kind of thought this as the kid. This is one of those situations where the trope doesn't exactly play out like you would expect. This is also something that Star Wars does that's different. Ordinarily, you would expect this magic weapon to be key in overcoming the major tasks or climactic tasks at the end. And so strangely in Star Wars, the way that happens to plan out, strangely in Star Wars, this magic weapon, the lightsaber, Luke does not use the lightsaber to blow up the Death Star. So in this case, we're going in different directions. We're going in different directions. He needs a starfighter. He needs something because it's space and all of that. So strangely, he never uses his lightsaber. And I even remember that as a kid. He does train with the lightsabers, the lightsaber on the Millennium Falcon. But it's a connection to his family and his destiny, his father. Of course, it will be important in later movies. But here, we're looking at this as a standalone movie. It is kind of odd that Luke Skywalker never uses the lightsaber to actually accomplish some major goal. He uses the Force and a torpedo and an X-wing, but he doesn't do that. Instead, this is probably what guessing this is what James is going to say. I'm guessing. Instead, the payoff of this trope here of the archetype of the trope, or whatever we want to call it here, the trope of the lightsaber is paid off by the duel between Vader and Kenobi. So you see the magic weapons in action. But the idea of a magic weapon does come back. So in some way, Luke does use a magic weapon. Does come back at the end, even though it's not in the context of the lightsaber. Does come back at the end because the shaft is ray shielded. So you will have to use proton torpedoes. And that's going to be very important later. So that you're going to have to use proton torpedoes, a rare, because you can't carry an infinite number of proton torpedoes. The X-Wings can't. You got like one shot or something, right? You don't have an infinite number of proton torpedoes on board your X-Wing. So it's a rare weapon and a special weapon because it allows this particular type of shielding to be defeated. So I thought it was interesting that idea. That's very brief, at the end, but it does bring up the idea of a special weapon. So Luke does end up using a special weapon to defeat the Death Star. You think the magic weapon should be the Force? Now, because he does use the Force. Now, he does use that. So I could see that arguably. That the weapon that he gets is the Force because he does end up using the Force. Jeopards is saying, yeah, I was just thinking that the Force is the magic weapon. Once he grasped the lightsaber, he grasped the Force for the first time, too. Or well, yeah, right. I mean, I think that's clearly the kind of thing that's being called. And I suppose like pulling a blade out of the stone, lighting up the blade. Yeah, I think so. Yeah, kind of surprising they didn't at least give Luke some thick doors to literally cut his way through. Yeah, I was thinking that a good time for him to have used the lightsaber, if you were going to have him use it, would be in Leia's rescue. If you're going to have that, he should have used it in there. Now we play the Leia's message. And this is, again, something that Star Wars is going to do strange. Because remember, Leia is on her side quest. So once again, Leia, as through the deputy herald of R2-D2 in this case, but Leia, now, because of technology, now in this case, she probably could have sent a letter. The visual part was extremely important for Luke during his inciting incident. But here, to get Obi-Wan Kenobi into action, she probably could have sent a letter, right? Because if he knows who she is, and maybe it's bearing her royal seal or something like that, that could get into action. Because of technology, though, we have her presence. Again, making this more have a greater impact. Than just giving Obi-Wan Kenobi a letter. But once again, this misfires. This is according to the standard story structure, this is a misfire again, because at this point, Leia has been the herald twice for two different characters. Okay, first, she was the herald for R2-D2. Okay, so all right, that's not our main character. And then she is the herald for Obi-Wan Kenobi. She doesn't call Luke to adventure. She calls Obi-Wan Kenobi to adventure. So it's the odd part is that she misses Luke twice. She plays the herald twice, and in both cases, she charged someone other than Luke. She charged Obi-Wan Kenobi. Obi-Wan Kenobi needs to get back in action. True, Obi-Wan Kenobi needs to get back in action. And he accepts the call. Then Kenobi plays the role of herald. So he is both mentor and herald. And depending on what we're talking about, our relationship with supernatural aid, then Kenobi plays the role of herald to Luke. We have gone around the world or around the galaxy to deliver a call to action to Luke, a call to adventure to Luke. We have been all over the place doing this, and this does not happen. Like we are now. Let me see where the call to action is happening at 36 minutes into the film. It takes 36 minutes into the film to ping pong this message around so many different characters to finally issue Luke a call to adventure. And he hasn't even accepted the call to adventure yet. Luke rejects the call. Famously. And notice that he can reject it. And this whole scene plays out because we're not starting Luke on action. All of this plays out much more slowly than it does in the case of R2-D2. R2-D2 is in the middle of action. R2-D2's arc through this goes very fast. R2-D2's on his way. C-3PO is embodying the rejection of the call to adventure. But, man, we move much faster. We take a much slower approach to getting all this underway with Luke. Luke rejects the call. I said so, but it takes 36 minutes. So ordinarily, like in a 2-hour film, if you're going to follow a more classic structure, then at 30 minutes, you should be crossing the threshold from Act 1 into Act 2. But it takes 30 minutes to get Luke the call to adventure. Now, like I said, if you ignore the first 17 minutes, which is R2-D2's story, then the structure as far as quarters goes much faster. Goes much more dead on. They could definitely have been a money thing too. Yeah, it would not be been near as powerful. I'm not saying it would have been powerful. This is much more powerful, and it's enabled by technology. But whereas Luke might not have been motivated by the letter, Obi-Wan could have. And it's not. I mean, it's not terribly unusual to have somebody send somebody a letter with like their seal on it or something like that. Okay, Luke rejects the call. Now let me go back here to where did I write? Okay. Like, hang on. So this is, hang on. So hang on. The princess missed with her call to adventure. Twice. And the mentor had to deliver it, what do you say, 36 minutes into this film. If you want Luke to receive the call to adventure from Princess Leia, put him on the blockade runner and make him somebody nobody cares about. He is the lowest of the low on board. The lowest station guy, like not even in the fleet. The lowest station guy on the blockade runner. Like a janitor. Or whatever. Like not one of her soldiers or something like that. That won't work. Like he needs to be a janitor or whatever on the blockage runner. The blockade runner. That no one notices. Seeing the princess from afar on board. He's just like from afar, just like C-3PO says that that he doesn't know who she is. Luke needs to be in that situation. Whoa, I see her on the hall. I'm on this ship. I see her over there, but I'm not even of enough social status to go and talk to her. You know, so maybe but Luke is in that situation. In labor in a position of labor on the ship. You can have someone that he's like working for someone who has claim to his labor. Dirtiest part of the engine room, whatever. And you can still give him his skill that, well, he's a good pilot. He's the worker. He's the janitor. Nobody cares. If you want to have him do something heroic on the crossing of the threshold. Otherwise, you can do something, do it in some other way. But if you want him to be agent of there, then we go ahead and keep in that he's a good pilot or whatever. But he doesn't ever get to use that because he's in a situation where nobody cares about that, working in this dirty engine room. Inciting incident. The attack by the Star Destroyer. Everything happens like you see it, except for instead of going to R2-D2 with her problems, Luke is all of a sudden in the thick of it. The princess comes to him. Woman in need, like James was saying, woman in need. Luke is shocked and hands him the plans. Get this to who? Get this to not to Obi-Wan Kenobi. If we're going more direct here, get this to my father on Alderaan. It is of critical importance. Luke needs to reject the call. Wouldn't the Space Fleet warriors, whatever the rebel warriors are, wouldn't the rebel warriors be better to take this mission than me? That's when Princess reminds him that, Princess reminds him that he's worthless. Not exactly, but reminds him that he is invisible, like socially or whatever. They will be looking for me and my warriors. You can slip by. You can slip away. Danger comes. Like the blast by C-3PO's head. Make that scene, give that scene to Luke. Scene to Luke. Okay, give that scene to Luke, and then that way, and he accepts the call to adventure. So it's a quick turnaround. Accepts the call to adventure, and leaps into some kind of starfighter that he's either going to get damaged, or he can leap into the life pod, and they can use some other way to disable that. And let's accept the call to adventure and jumps in the pod to cross the threshold. However, we're going to defeat the Threshold Guardian. Skip the side quest. They can be near Alderaan. This would change up some other things, but they can skip the side quest because they could be headed toward Alderaan. This would make it less the space travel things, and you probably want to add that back in. But this could be on any other planet or whatever, because you're just traveling through planets, between planets, like you're traveling like down a road between different cities or whatever. Luke crashes. Starts Act 2 like the droids. Lost in like the droids did, lost in another world, or lost in, we'll call it, liminal space. Attacked by sand people. Can't handle himself. Enter supernatural aid. And then the mentor. That's how you do this much faster. That's how you get Luke. That's how you get Luke directly involved in this much faster, instead of 30 minutes. Now that we would save a lot of time if we did that. we could save some time by cutting down. If you're going to do the prologue with the droids, we could save some time by cutting that down, especially all the wandering and stuff like that. And even the sandcrawler scene, like if we wanted to do a scene like Trinity, and Sable Phoenix was saying that was like 6 minutes or something like that, I would say, all right, maybe something like that. We need to get these droids down to 6 minutes. So they can do all of that. They can land, but then when they get captured by Jawas or whatever, instead of going through the sandcrawler, they would need to have that done all together. And then guess who needs to find them? Luke. We got to go much more direct with that. Yeah. So inside, if we're gonna do the droids, we need to do the droids within 5 minutes, and then we need to get them in Luke's hands, and then having the princess make her call to adventure. So that's why I say that Luke Skywalker and R2-D2 are the same character, because they're both going through the hero's journey. And you could take Luke Skywalker and you could put him on that blockade runner in that way. Now I realize that changes other things, but I'm talking about from the structural perspective here. I'm talking about from the structural perspective. That's why that's weird. If you're starting off this movie and you're trying to write a hero's journey, and you're thinking, I had Luke Skywalker, and then I got all this stuff with the droids and stuff like that. Take Luke Skywalker, take whoever your Luke Skywalker is, and make him R2-D2. Sable says, referring to my big string of Max character comments earlier, Star Wars has become a standard reference for story structure, but the myths that the hero's journey story structure come from don't themselves adhere to the story structure. They're not stories in and of themselves. They're archetypical, and the point of them is Jungian, not narrative. The myths that the hero's journey story structure come from don't follow them themselves. In that way, Star Wars is much closer to an actual myth than what has become standard screenplay approach today. This is why, in my opinion, it resonates so deeply and has never been emulated. People try to slavishly copy it rather than approaching it from the level of meaning. Doug says the first 17 minutes fits the Heroine's Labyrinth model. I'll explain maybe Tuesday. Yeah, maybe that we do the table talk on Tuesday. Doug and I were talking about that. Is this on this subject? Maybe the slower call to action increases the audience investment in Luke. It can be something to test. Well, I think that's so. We've got an idea here. I kind of want to think about. I kind of want to do it. I was thinking about a division. If you were to do like a matrix, what does your story do if you do this? Your start can either be your start on action, non-action start. And I think what you're saying, Retro Nerd Girl, is true, that what we're doing here, or what often the goal would be, like if you're starting on action, you're trying to get the audience invested with R2-D2 fast. Through action and violence and all of this and laser blasts. If you're going the non-action start, you're trying to get people invested in the character in another way by showing that they're like you, that they're invested in the problems, that all of that. So we had action start, non-action start, and then heroes. And I have not thought about this in great detail, but heroes are playing keep away from the bad guys. That's like, we got to keep the plans of the Death Star away from the bad guys. The bad guys are hunting us. Whereas so heroes are playing keep away, or heroes are trying to get something from the bad guys. And then I bet if you cross these, and this is something I'm going to think about later, but I bet if you crossed these, then you would find out what elements that your story, you're going to use the structure of the hero's journey in different ways. There are probably going to be elements, what order things happen in, the elements that are present, the ones that are important, the ones that probably fade to the background, about whether or not you are starting on action or you're doing a non-action start, and then whether your heroes have something that the bad guys want and they're trying to keep it from them, or if they have to go and get something from the bad guys. Like, for instance, in this case, it could be that a dragon shows up. You could do a non-action start. Everything is very starts off idyllic. You got very happy, generally life, but then all of a sudden a dragon shows up and disrupts everything. That's your inciting incident, and the only thing that can kill the dragon is the magic sword that's in the other world. And so for act 2, the hero's got to go into the other world to get the magic sword from somebody, some other type of evil. That way he can come back in act 3 and use the magic sword to kill the dragon that's his home. There might be something in here about what your story is like when we've got these things. These maintenance crew members, etc., also happen to have little knowledge of secrets and esoteric insights. The thing is, if you do it that way, getting a direct command from royalty, it's a lot like pressure to override the refusal of the call. Well, you've got to have pressure to override the refusal of the call. You need a lot of pressure always to override the refusal of the call. So actually, over here, so how do we get Luke to accept the call? It's true. You really need to over motivate someone to take on, as Doug would say, something that could very well end in their destruction. So over motivation, I think, is fine. C-3PO, our droids, is over motivated by the idea that he's going to die right there if he doesn't go. Yes, he might die if he goes on this adventure, but he's certainly going to die right now if he doesn't. So that is over motivation. Because he says, like, what are you talking about? Mission. So he doesn't understand what C-3PO has gone on. But something like Royal Command by a woman in need. Royal Command. That's if Princess Leia gave it to one of the fleet troopers, he would definitely go. Royal Command, exactly. Give me my orders. He would definitely go. If you're the tech worker or you're some basic nobody crewman, that's a big shock. That, wait a minute, I have no skills. I'm not a great warrior. I'm not anything. You want me to do this big thing? So Royal Command by woman in need, with the addition of blasters going off by your head, explosions by your head, you're over motivating that person, and that's I think that's fine, because the bigger ask of the bigger royal ask needs a lot of motivation. Right? If it's a small ask, then why are we even bothering telling the story? It's going to be this big ask. Leia's exchange with R2-D2 meets the criteria for the heroine's engaging with fragile power, where the heroine enlists and entrusts a small or childlike creature that appears to be unthreatening. The fragile power always proves critical to success. The story then follows the fragile power's journey to complete the mission the heroines gave him. The thing is, this would all happen so quick that we wouldn't have time to get invested in the characters in the same way. Well, so I mean, maybe, Sable, then maybe you prefer, hey, the non-action start. I think, you don't think anybody was invested with what was going on. We said that we have it seemed like, or James was even talking about, a bias for starting on action. Lots of movies start on action and still can get you invested, I think. Douglas says, Leia does this again in Return of the Jedi with Wicket the Ewok. So there we go. Okay, so then you have the bias toward the start on non-action. We want to start on non-action. Because Sable says, that's a big failing for a lot of movies today. Got to start with action, but doesn't give us a reason to care. So Sable has a bias for a non-action start. So maybe that's a reason to just start with Luke then. Like in that case, maybe it's saying that, hey, yeah, we don't need this opening segment. We can start with Luke. We can start a non-action start with Luke. Leia does this again in Return of the Jedi with Wicket the Ewok. Ripley does this with Newt. Lady Eowyn does this with Mary. If you really want to squeeze the lemon, have Luke's home planet with the be the one that they've tested the Death Star on, making Luke even more yearn with the dark side, being tormented for revenge. Yeah, make it Luke's planet. That's a good point. We kind of have that with Luke's home was destroyed. So how do we get him to? You have to over motivate. What I was saying is that in this case, it's kind of like the Death Star blowing up the planet, except for it's the. But what motivates Luke to go on the call is danger comes home. Danger comes to you. That's exactly what happened with the robots, because the blasters are going off by their head. They're doing it faster right there. But then Luke realizes, C-3PO realizes that if I might die if I go on this mission, but I'm really going to die if I stay here. Luke realizes the same thing. Same realization. I will die if I stay here. Not being involved is not a choice. Danger comes to me. Danger is coming to me. So I might as well go. So Luke goes home. Now, so he does not accept the call. We see the Jawas as they're going around someplace. And then he goes, oh my God, I got to get home. If they trace the droids here, I got to go. He flies out home. He sees that it's destroyed. His home has been destroyed. So it's not the, but so you could play on that. Is that ever really brought up? So the Empire did destroy his family. But that's not really used as a temptation. So you could have done both. I mean, you could have had both. So if you're like, okay, we're still got to destroy Alderaan. But we also have Luke's home destroyed as well, and that over motivates him. Luke returns to the Mentor, the Kenobi, and accepts the call. And that is, did I say that it was 42 minutes in? It's 42 minutes in. 42 minutes into the movie. The hero has accepted the call. Luke doesn't exactly have a threshold guardian. That's also something that's non-standard. We saw that in R2's arc, but we didn't see that here to overcome. But we do have the land speeder that gets them to the next place, which is Mos Eisley. Whatever. Eisley, the spaceport, if that's how you spell it. Mos Eisley, the spaceport. And I do think that it's interesting here, just as the escape pod was useless, just as the vehicle, the escape pod was useless after getting the robots, the droids, out of Act 1, out of their Act 1. After this, Luke's speeder is also useless after they get to Mos Eisley. They can sell it. Get to Mos Eisley. They need something else. And then we go on. So there is the scene where they are headed in the speeder right after he accepts the call to adventure. That is them going into Act 2. Phew. So that's my analysis of Act 1. Let's see what's going on in the comments. then we will have to wrap up. Leia approaching Luke with this mission is also important to showing their developing relationship and Luke's development as an actual hero. She hated his guts at first. Aren't you a little short for a stormtrooper, lampooning his involvement? Yeah, aren't you a little short for a stormtrooper? She doesn't even know it's Luke at that point. She's lampooning a stormtrooper. Yeah, but he didn't. But it was a stormtrooper that walked in, and kind of like she was defiant to Darth Vader, she's defiant to the stormtrooper. Incredulous is a good way for it. TSL Frontman says the bad guys aren't just evil; they're foils in the desire for the hero. The BGGs all want something too. Yes. Leia grabbing Han's. Grabbing a blaster and Han shooting first. They're very unique for the times of the film. The Sword of a Thousand Truths. I'll give you an example of a perfect one to look at that we could look at later on Table Talk or here or whatever. That is the idea of starting on action and the investment, and also showing you a hero that's very close to a hero. Is that How to Train Your Dragon? How to Train Your Dragon does that. The first opening, like 8 minutes of How to Train Your Dragon, you are starting on action. The village is under attack. And yet, Sable says that here's an example, I think, Sable, of where you start with action. You start with extreme action, dragon attack on the Viking village. We are in action. And yet they still do, I think, make you care about Hiccup in that moment. So it's a lot of things happen very fast because it's under pressure and all that time. And yet it still works, I think, very well. So I think that you can develop attachment to characters in the middle of action and things moving fast. In order to get to them to accept the call, you have to give the hero what they want and then unfetter them from responsibility that would delay their acceptance. And yeah, sometimes that happens in a very harsh way. Like that. Okay, hey, no, I got to look after my family. Well, if they kill your family, then all of a sudden you don't have to do that. The threat from afar intrudes on Luke's life. Yeah, killing his aunt and uncle. I was calling that a threat. So a threat from afar, but I was calling that danger comes home, basically. Sable says, I don't necessarily have a bias on starting with non-action. It's just that a lot of movies do that and keep going with the action without giving us enough character basis to invest in it. Yeah, but his family was, which is kind of like his world at that time. His world was there. So his planet wasn't blown up, but his world was. I love a slow burn. Andor did this so well. I haven't seen Andor. I will say that if you look at a lot of action movies like Die Hard or Terminator or Aliens, the best of the Marvel movies, they don't actually start with the height of action. There's a build-up. If he was on the Corvette, he would have been from Alderaan. There could have been reasons for him to be from someplace else. He wouldn't know that the explosion until the second or third act. Hey, PH. Yeah, but remember, this is a trilogy, so 42 minutes is not bad if you take all of it, but we can't do that with this analysis. I'm not doing that with this analysis because it's not like George Lucas knew that it was going to be a trilogy. I mean, this movie could have bombed, and this could have been all there ever was. So he took, he just gave us one movie, and he did this movie very well, which is what allowed everything to continue. Well, he did this movie very well, and then Kershner directing Empire Strikes Back, did Empire Strikes Back very well. And that's what really started the entire franchise. It, got its sequel, and the sequel did well. So we were able to get a third. Because didn't Lucas say that if he could only tell one part of the story of the thing, all the story of the Star Wars galaxy, this is the story that needed to be told. And he was completely right about that because it is so archetypical. And then he did it, and he did it very well. And then they also followed up with a home run on Empire Strikes Back as well. So, and I don't think anybody's going to do that. If you're like, well, what is going on with 42 minutes into this movie? Like, it's approaching the halfway point. I mean, that's kind of weird, isn't it? If you think about the way this movie goes, The movie's only 2 hours long, and Luke doesn't accept the call to adventure until 42 minutes in, which is close. Is getting close toward halfway, right? I mean, it's not 52 minutes in, but this is there. But and nobody who is assessing this single film, like, is this film working, going to go, oh well, it's it's going to be a trilogy, so we maybe it might be a trilogy. It might be a trilogy, so we can take more time, because if this movie doesn't do well, then it's not going to be a trilogy for well. Actually, Luke's first threshold guardian is Uncle Owen, who prevents him from joining the academy. Parental figures are often threshold guardians. Yes. Now, I did mention that earlier. I said exactly that. I mean, the stormtroopers take care of that threshold guardian. But I was saying that oftentimes, yes, I think the person who is holding you down, in this case, Uncle Owen, the person who's trapping you in your everyday life that you want to get out of, often would make an excellent threshold guardian to overcome. So people are telling me to watch Andor. I just had lost interest. Maybe I should. It seemed like people had a lot to say about it. But by then I had just kind of lost interest in all the Star Wars shows. But Punk Soup says Andor is great. TSL Frontman says, Heath, you'll love Andor, especially for its structure. I can't say more without giving away its groove, but it's a masterclass. Well, all right. Well, then maybe Andor. I'll put that on the list over here. Maybe I should watch Andor then. I watched a bunch of stuff and was cleaning up my list, but now my list is growing again. All right. That was a lot. That was a lot more than I was thinking to do. I guess I could have actually split this into another day. But that is going through Act 1 of Star Wars. There's more to say, but it becomes much more classic from here on out. Like if you just look at starting with Luke, you're lining up structure right. I'm primarily concerned with to now do Empire. Right? Keep going and do them all. I guess the next big thing that I would have to add is, but I've talked about it before, is something in Act 3. I would have used some of the time that I saved in Act 1, even if you were going to keep the droids, but we got to cut down on the droids from like 17 minutes to 6 or something like that. I would use that time, I believe, in Act 3. There's some places in Act 3 where that needs to be used, and I would use a few more of those minutes in Act 2. So if you did cut it down, I think that you could add in a few minutes in Act 2 and develop the character who misses. We've talked about this before. Develop the character who misses his Death Star shot. He needs to be developed more. That's one thing that I would do, is that character needs to be developed more, because he needs to be a big hero. And so he's got to be a big hero. The guy who says, I'm starting my approach. He uses the targeting computer, but we actually needed to build his character out more, because we needed him to be a major character, a major hero. He's if anybody's going to blow up the Death Star, it needs to be that guy. If anybody's going to blow up the Death Star, it's going to be him, because we need to know that he is an excellent pilot. He's an excellent gunner. He's the best the Rebellion has to offer. And if anybody can possibly make the shot, it's him. But what does he do? He relies on technology and misses. And so if he can't do it, no one can. But Luke can, because he's not going to rely on technology. So I would have pushed that point even further if I had more screen time then to develop that character. That's how the way I would add the third. But anyway, I think that over these past 2 days, I hope that is something. It's something that I have never seen addressed in this particular way. We will see what Drake says.